Okay, everybody. Thank you again for being here. I am Laura Beal with Rest Strategies. We are helping facilitate this event today. I am going to real quick start the recording on my end. All right. We are going to go ahead and get started here. Again, I am Laura with Rest Strategies. Just want to go over a couple quick housekeeping things. As I said before, if all media members can please stay on mute unless you are called on for a question at the end, that would be great. Again, I will have a recording, so if anyone needs a recording afterwards, please let me know. We will let our participants get through their speaking comments, and then we will move to a Q&A. And then if anyone after this needs to talk to any of our participants, you can reach out to me and I would be happy to connect you with them for follow-up questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator today, Zach Gorchow from Gongwer News Service.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Laura. So this briefing is hosted by Secure Democracy USA, Protect Democracy, and All Voting is Local. These are three organizations I think those of us as reporters have become more familiar with. They're working to try to strengthen voter integrity and security in elections. And they wanted to get this briefing together to clear up any confusion and misinformation that's still out there with the public regarding elections and the rules and processes related to elections and certifying the votes. You know, all of us have been working on these issues quite extensively for a couple of years now. And a lot of familiar names and faces you're going to see here who are working to try to answer questions and clear up any confusion that may exist about elections. So I'm going to kind of pass the mic here. But briefly to introduce them, for those of you who aren't familiar with them, there's Chris Thomas, longtime former state elections director, is a fellow at the Bipartisan Policy Center and is an advisor to Detroit City Clerk Janice Winfrey, Ottawa County Clerk Justin Roebuck, Tony Daunt, who's chair of the State Board of the Board of State Canvassers, and Mary Ellen Gerwitz, vice chair of the Board of State Canvassers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Thomas.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you all. And I thank the organizations for sponsoring this and getting it organized. Typically, the canvassing of elections, both at the county level and the state level, have not been high news operations. They're usually something that's taken for granted, a lot of hard work at the county level, and then the Board of State Canvassers meeting in a bipartisan way to kind of put the last imprint on the election to certify it officially. So in 2020, the issue of canvassers at the county and state level doing their job briefly became a thing. Here in Michigan, but all elections were certified in 2020. In modern times, this is a new phenomenon around the country. So we will see how it goes moving forward this year. Personally, I'm not expecting any great difficulties. In 2021, there was a great deal of media attention paid to various canvassers appointed to county boards of canvassers who stated that they would not have certified the 2020 election and that they may not certify the 2022 election or future elections. However, the August primary this year was fully certified by the 83 county boards of canvassers and by the state board of canvassers. So this same issue has popped up around the country over time. In the 2000 election in Florida, where anything that could go wrong did go wrong, that was an issue there as well. And this year is an issue out in New Mexico in a local election. And at that point, it took the courts to come in and resolve the issues. So I think it's important to keep in mind, as the panelists today explain Michigan's canvassing process, that there's always a stopgap in the judicial process should the wheels come off, which again, I'm not expecting to occur this year. So the good news is that election deniers will never be successful in thwarting the will of the people. So I'll pass it back to you, Zach.
All right, I'm going to move now to Justin Roebuck, the Ottawa County Clerk.
Yeah, thanks so much, Zach. And I think, as Chris kind of iterated as well, and something we actually talk a lot about at the local level as far as election certification goes, elections, the process of getting election results and certifying election results happens in a very bipartisan and a very transparent way under Michigan law across the entire state. And when you think about the process, what happens on election night as the polls close in every single precinct across the state of Michigan, the ballot tabulators are producing totals, a totals tape or a totals report, essentially, that is signed by the bipartisan team that's actually there in the precinct or in the absentee counting board, whatever that situation is. And that totals tape is signed off on and verified by that bipartisan team at the time. Multiple copies of those totals tapes then go to different locations. So we're spreading that out as a check and balance in the process. The local clerk, municipal clerk, or township clerk is getting a copy of that, the county clerk, and then the county board of canvassers as well. And really immediately following election day, the following day at the county level, that's where that first certification process begins to take place. And the bipartisan board of county canvassers, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats appointed, nominated by the political parties and then appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, begins their work in what I would call essentially is an audit of that balancing of the precinct. So what they are looking at in detail are every single poll book that comes from every single precinct within that county. They're taking a look at those totals tapes and seeing that the number of total ballots cast on that totals tape matches the total number of voters that came into that precinct. And it's an extensive process. They have 14 calendar days under statute to complete that process. And, in many cases, they are working through weekends and large elections to ensure the balancing of that. The Board of County Canvassers at the local level also has authority to correct errors. And I think this is an important check and balance in the process. Elections is a human process. Errors do occur, and we need to have mechanisms, and we do have mechanisms in place to ensure that we correct those errors prior to certification. And so, the county clerk plays a role in that, essentially as the clerk of the Board of Canvassers. We have authority to assist the board in their work, but they're really playing a critical role in that transparent process and that bipartisan process in a public meeting, going through a very detailed checklist of items that need to be ensured essentially before the election is certified at the local level. And then obviously we're passing that up to the state level.
We're going to move now to Tony Dawn, Chair of the Board of State Canvassers.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks for those who have joined to participate in this. I'm happy and honored to be part of this because I believe strongly in maintaining the integrity of our system, our election systems, judicial systems, our entire system of governance. And I think having people from both sides of the aisle here to talk about this, to clarify questions and concerns people may have because of, as Chris pointed out, the way things have moved over the last several cycles. And, it's unfortunate that it's become a rather bipartisan affair where if you disagree with the results, you cast doubt on those results. And it was taken to an entirely new malignant level this last time in 2020. But I think that's a result of each side kind of trying to one up each other. And hopefully this type of program and discussion can dispel some of those concerns for 2022. As Justin laid out, the vast majority of the work on these Canvas, in fact, pretty much the entirety of the work, aside from adding the results and the totals from 83 counties, occurs at the county level. And it is bipartisan. I've been present at canvassing at the local level. I've been present at recall elections. I've been present on election day, all of those different things. And it is bipartisan. The vast majority of people are there because they want to help and be part of the system. And therefore, people should have faith that these results have gone through numerous steps of vetting, that people with both parties have had their eyes on the results, have looked at them, have done, as Justin mentioned, an audit, and send that up to us. And our role as the Board of State Canvassers is math, to make sure that the staff is added correctly and to certify those results. The Bureau of Elections staff is highly professional, have enjoyed working with them immensely over the last couple of years, and probably don't agree with them on many things, items of policy, but they've been very fair to us. And I think it's important for people to know that despite having very strong beliefs of my own and disagreeing on matters of principle or law or interpretation on things like ballot initiatives, constitutional amendments, etc., this is a very ministerial duty. This is results coming to us for us to finish the certification so that our results are final. And if there are questions from either side, from parties involved in the elections, they have remedies for that. They have the ability to request a recount. They have ability to take their claims to court. And I don't think anybody begrudges people doing that. Where things run afoul is when you make unbased, claims that simply don't hold up, that are not true, that have not been shown or proven in a court of law. And therefore, I was never a good math student, but I think I can handle the addition of 83 counties and determining that these are the results, and we are here to certify them.
All right, and next is going to be Mary Ellen Gurwitz, the Vice Chair of the Board of State Canvassers.
Yeah, good morning. And I really appreciate the hosts for putting this together, because it is so important to get this information out as broadly as we can. I had the good fortune of serving for a little while in 2021 on the Wayne County Board of Canvassers. So I appreciate Justin's description of the work that is done at the county level. And that is the most important work and the most time consuming. Wayne County has, I think, more than 900 precincts. And so at the county level, as Justin explained, every poll book is reviewed by the county boards of canvassers and by the county clerk and staff. And they ultimately certify in each of the 83 counties that these are the results for every election in that county. And that certification from each of the counties goes to the Secretary of State. And this is all very carefully spelled out in the statute. So we're following the direction ultimately from the legislature about who does what. But those results come up from the counties. They get tallied, and the Bureau of Elections works under the direction of the Board of State Canvassers and the Secretary of State. And the Bureau the Secretary of State is responsible for putting together the totals from all 83 counties. And the Bureau of Elections is essentially doing that mathematical work. So when it comes to the state, our job is the easiest because we don't really have any discretion. The numbers are there, and our job is to make sure that those numbers that have come to us from the counties have been certified as accurate. We put it all together, or the Bureau of Elections does it at our direction, and we certify this is it. These are the totals. These are the totals statewide. These are all of the people who have won the elections. And it's a lot of paperwork. And we put our imprimatur on it. Tony and me and the other two canvassers, we sign off. This is official. as Chris said, this is the last official imprint. I remember we have been hearing about who says who won. And there was some claim during the 2020 election that it ought not to be the media who says who has won an election. We're the ones who say who won. And that is a big responsibility, but as Tony pointed out, it's really a ministerial responsibility. We don't have discretion. The statute tells us that we shall certify. So this isn't something, as Chris said, there is a stopgap, which is the Supreme Court, but I think it's that's not going to happen. I think we have responsible canvassers who recognize what their obligation is. So as I said, our job is the easiest, Justin's is the hardest, but we're all putting it together to make sure that the citizens of Michigan know that their votes have been counted and accurately counted. We have, I think it's important to say, no investigatory power. We don't have any authority to look behind the numbers. We are simply putting it together. If anyone suspects or accuses, makes any accusation of election fraud, that's not something that the canvassers consider. That is something to be taken to law enforcement authorities.
All right, I'm going to ask the first couple questions, and then I'm going to hand it back to Laura Beal to moderate the reporter Q&A. First question is for Chris and Justin. Just knowing this new world we seem to be in where questions about election legitimacy seem likely to come up again, I'm wondering what, if anything, you're doing to prepare for these kinds of controversies on election night and the day after. Do you feel like you're going to have to be doing anything on a more proactive posture as far as putting out information, or do you feel like you'll just have to react to whatever claims come in? Justin, why don't you go ahead? Yeah, Justin, why don't you go ahead first?
Yeah, no, thanks, Zach. That's a great question. I think it is really, really critical for us to be able to communicate as much as we can in advance. Again, our whole process is built on trust relationships ultimately. And when you think about how decentralized Michigan's elections really are, really across the country, but particularly in Michigan with local municipal clerks, it's so important to be able to build those trust relationships and be able to communicate what we're doing. We need to be boldly transparent. And I think it's, something that we've taken seriously as criticisms come up or questions come up about the process. We want to engage with voters and we want to kind of pre-bunk information as well and get the factual information out to people in a consistent way. And I do think it's important that as we anticipate another election, and elections, for a while now in the country have been close. And when elections are close, people pay attention and things, it matters to people. There's a very an emotional connection, right, with the process. And so for us being out front in what we're doing from the beginning to the end, one of the things that we do when we do logic and accuracy testing of the election equipment, for example, we're there doing a Facebook Live or doing a social media post or making sure that people know that this is happening and this is what's happening. And then the canvas itself, we've done some one-on-one sit-down interviews with our members of the Board of County Canvassers here. We want to make sure that people are aware of when the meetings are happening. Obviously, they're required to be publicly posted meetings, but we want to, elevate that message and get it out there so that people can see for themselves. They can ask questions in person if they have those concerns or questions. So I do think that's a really important element of what we're dealing with today and making sure that we're, out in front of the message.
So I think that Justin is definitely in the seat that would handle this after the election in terms of how they handle the canvas and all of the transparency that goes with that. But in advance of an election, it is really incumbent on election officials to be up to speed, to be prepared to handle the amount of mail ballots, for example. You harken back to 2020, it's the first time that Michigan has had a high level of mail voting. Detroit, we had 68% of the vote was by mail, when it typically is 22, 23%. So balancing all of that is very difficult. And certainly a pandemic put us all on our back of our feet. So moving into this election, clerks have, I think, really gotten their feet under them in terms of what it takes to dot all the I's, cross all the T's, in terms of processing absentee ballots. And I think the canvassing boards are going to see a better balancing. We made great strides in Detroit. We had 2 elections last year, balanced 100% in both of them, and had minimal number of imbalances in the August primary, less than 10 precincts out of 450. So it's always a challenge, but really much of what will happen after the election is going to depend on how well prepared election officials are going in.
And then this other question is for Mary Ellen and Tony. There's been a lot of really good reporting from some of my colleagues and news media about changes in the composition of county boards of canvassers. A lot of questions about whether some of these new folks might not vote to certify elections at the local level. What are you preparing for, and what will the Board of State Canvassers do if you have 1 or 10 or however many counties that do not certify their results?
If I can answer that, Tony.
Yep, go ahead.
The statute regarding the county canvass says that the counties have to certify within 14 days of the election. If they don't, the statute says that all of their election materials have to be immediately sent to the state. And the state Board of Canvassers then has the obligation to certify the county results. So that has happened very infrequently, but we are prepared to take care of it if in fact it does happen. I've talked with the Bureau of Elections staff about what they anticipate, and it probably depends on what county, if any, fails to certify. It is possible that the Bureau of Elections staff and maybe canvassers would go to a particular county to finish the work that has not been finished, or the certification that has not been done. Or it may be that the county will, in accordance with the statute, bring all of their material to Lansing, which is burdensome for a county. And it also, the statute also provides that if the state has to come in and do the county certification, that's done at the expense of the county. So I think that the county clerks strongly encourage their canvassers to do the certification that is their obligation.
Yeah, and Mary Ellen answered that perfectly, and I would simply add that I remain hopeful that the canvassers and all 83 boards or 83 counties will do their duty and do their jobs. And I think it has the reverse impact of what somebody who's refusing to do their job is intending, because I think you're taking yourself out of the process and you're removing your ability to see those results and to participate, to make sure that everything is on the up and up, to match the numbers. And like Mary Ellen, I've spoken with members of staff at the Bureau of Elections, and they're prepared. They're taking this potential seriously, but remain hopeful, like Mary Ellen and I, that this won't be an issue. But we are prepared to do our duty and to do our job.
All right. With that, I think we're going to go into a more traditional media Q&A here. So in the interest of time, if you have a question, please put your name and outlet in the chat. I don't know if we'll be able to get to everybody, but again, as I said at the beginning, if you have follow-up questions we don't get to, feel free to email me. I think everyone has my email, but if not, I will write it in the chat right now. And you can reach out to me afterwards. First up, we have Aura Lander from votebeat.org. You can unmute and ask your question. You're still on mute.
I'd like to thank the panelists and the participants for doing this. It's a very big help for us journalists. I want to ask Mr. Daunt, if there are some predicted problems reported in a lot of national publications on election day, will the state board, as Ms. Gerwitz said, go ahead and certify as you're obligated to do?
And you're referring to kind of what we just talked about in terms
Yes,
of
sir. Mm-hmm.
county individuals. Yeah, I think it's very clear that that statute provides a process for this to play out if people don't do their job, if there are problems at the local level. And again, math not being a strong suit is still the key here, and making sure that the number of people who have shown up, the poll book shows have voted, that the tapes match those numbers, and that any discrepancies can be adjudicated, can be determined what the reason was. Maybe somebody attempted to spoil their ballot because they wanted to vote differently, they made a mistake. All of those things happen during elections, but staff, clerks like Justin, Republican clerks, Democratic clerks, they take this job seriously. They're not in it to put their thumb on the scales. And I think if there are problems at the local level, it falls on us to do that, and we intend to do so.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have Beth LeBlanc from the Detroit News.
Hey, thank you for taking these questions. This question I think would probably be for like Chris or Justin. We're hearing from the Secretary of State's office that there could be like a 24-hour delay before final unofficial results are available because of absentee counting. We're also hearing that, there's a new process for delivering modems with the results on them. Are you guys able to walk us through kind of what sort of delays might be anticipated and what sort of delays voters should know about so that they don't raise suspicions in terms of like what's happening and so that they're fully informed about what the reality might look like on election day?
Go ahead, Justin.
Gotcha. No problem, Chris. Yeah, it's a great question, Beth. I think, there's a couple of factors there. Obviously, as we've talked about now for really 2 years, on the absentee ballot front and the counting of absentee ballots, there is a reality that the workflow of counting absentee ballots is really time intensive, and it's important to get it right. And beyond the speed, we want to make sure that it's right. And so our local municipal clerks, as well as a couple of counties who have the responsibility of contracting with locals for counting of absentee ballots, priority number one is getting it right. We have this pre-processing legislation, obviously, that passed a few weeks ago that allows for a certain amount of time given, right, to expand an opportunity to not necessarily process, not necessarily tabulate the ballots, but get some of that workflow out of the way. And while I think that is helpful, and it's certainly much better than nothing, I think we will still see in some of our urban areas, and I think we probably saw the listing from the Secretary of State, some of our largest urban communities are not taking advantage of it, I think because of the reality of what they see as the time constraints, and is it worth the added burden of some of the pre-processing requirements in there. So I think there's a reality that, yes, we will see some late counting of absentee ballots. And I think that's perfectly normal and acceptable. And again, the important thing there is that we're doing it right and getting the counts right, first and foremost. On the modeming front, there's obviously a lot of changes with regard to that process, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, we're essentially, across the country in the process of decommissioning the electronic transmission of results directly from tabulators. And so we're seeing a lot of counties move to other means of that. In particular, we saw examples of that in the August primary, where we are now, hand delivering. Essentially, we always were hand delivering, but relying on that initial hand delivering of results first will cause additional time delays in the process. There's just no way around that. And again, I think the important thing there is that we have the security element of ensuring that those results are submitted, transmitted appropriately, and that is the thing that we're focusing on. And potential time delays may be there, but the important thing is that we're getting it right, and that's something that we're conscious of for sure going into this process.
Would only add that the legislature still has not given election officials in the state the means to run and tabulate large volumes of mail ballots that the citizens of this state enacted back in 2018. Many states, both red states, blue states, purple states, allow for the tabulation of ballots in advance of election day. Our neighbors in Ohio do it for 17 days in advance. Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, all kinds of different states allow that. And second, I will say that, we will in Detroit be publishing partial results on election night. I can't tell you exactly what time that'll be, but we will not wait until everything is done on Wednesday before our results are published. And we'll publish those, you'll probably see them first on the city clerk's website, and we will be transmitting physically the data over to the Wayne County Board or the Wayne County Clerk's office for her to post as well. But we want to make sure that by the end of the evening, there's a large portion of the Detroit returns posted.
Thank you, Chris. All right, now we have Eric from 9 and 10 News.
Hello, thanks for letting me ask this question. Maybe you guys touched on this early on. Sorry, I had to take a call early. But one of the questions I've gotten that I haven't really gotten a full answer on is when you're using terms like you're obligated to certify the election, what if there are legitimate issues that pop up? I mean, if a board of canvassers, whether the state or the county, decides not to certify something because of an issue, but then they're going to be mandated to do it anyways because they're obligated, that doesn't seem like much of a check and balance if it's going to happen no matter what. So I guess maybe I'm missing the process that if there is a legitimate question had where the certification shouldn't happen, how do you do that?
I can take a first swing at that. I think, Eric, I think that's a great question. And it's a good point. I think both Tony and Mary Ellen kind of touched on this as well. And in the fact that at the county level, that is where that obligation to correct errors happens. So, for example, the Board of County Canvassers has the authority to subpoena ballots, for lack of a better term. They can order that ballots be delivered to the County Board of Canvassers from the local clerk's office. We have representatives who were physically in the precinct and a bipartisan team on that night come in if there's a question about a balance, for example, issue. And we have the authority under the authority of the Board of Canvassers to retabulate ballots to correct imbalances and correct errors. So, there is that obligation there under law to ensure that we're doing things correctly and appropriately. And there may be some cases, I'm thinking of a couple of examples where, again, elections being a human process, sometimes there's a challenge, right? We've had an incident in our county before where a voter literally left the precinct with a ballot in their hand and walked out and drove away. That is an example of something that we cannot correct from perspective of we'll always have one less ballot in the totals than we will voter on the poll book, in other words. And so some of those clerical issues result in human element issues as well. And it's the board's responsibility to document that before they certify, so that there's a record of what happened. And they are doing a little bit of that investigatory work under their limited authority to do that, and to make sure that we've documented everything.
Yeah, and there's a process for challenging results. And again, I don't think anybody, maybe when, emotionally people begrudge the other side for taking those opportunities, but from a standpoint of professionalism and adjudicating things properly, that's why we have statute. That's why we write our laws down. That's why we have a process laid out and take things to the court and ultimately agree or disagree with the court's decision. We abide by that. And, our role at the state isn't to say, oh, well, there's questions there in Ingham County, for instance, and they haven't sent us the results. We're going to go ahead and kind of determine what those results are and certify everything. No, we don't have that ability until the information from the counties below have been transmitted to us to do that final tabulation and certification. And so there are methods and ways to challenge the results that candidates may undertake, but that gets settled before the information comes to us.
I could make a comment on that. We saw in 2020 that anybody could make an allegation there's something wrong with a county candidates. And we also saw in 2021 and 2020 and 2021 that none of it was true. So you're not going to stop a canvass based on allegations. What was amazing about 2020, given all the claims of fraud and all the terrible things that happened in Detroit and elsewhere, nobody asked for a recount. And there is the step that one can take. If you don't think these are accurate returns, there's a recount available. And that used to be a common step that was taken. But the allegations in and of themselves of what people did is not enough to stop a canvass. And you can see what would happen if county boards of canvassers had a discretion to say, oh, so someone filed a conspiracy claim about a certain community, we're just not going to certify. They have no ability even to figure out whether those conspiracies are all made up or whether they're real. That's not their job. There's law enforcement for that, and there are recounts.
Thank you, Chris. And with that, we are out of time. I know there were a few more questions in the chat. So again, if you have any follow-up questions, please send me an email and I will get with the participants and get you an answer or coordinate for you to chat with them. So again, thank you everybody for participating today. Thank you to Secure Democracy, All Voting is Local, and Protect Democracy for hosting this event. And let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much.